What's up guys, today I'm going to be showing you how I make a really cool lamp out of epoxy resin and this piece of cherry burl. So the first step in making your lamp is to find a piece of wood. Now I'm using this piece of really nice cherry burl. It's got a lot of really cool grain and figuring. Now I've cut my piece of cherry burl to about 3.5, 4 inches by about 3.5, 4 inches in size. So now that you've done that, you're going to want to build a frame around your piece of wood, so that way when you pour the epoxy, it doesn't run everywhere. So there's all sorts of things that you can use to build your frame for your epoxy. You can use 1/8 inch plywood, you can use MDF, you can use whatever. The ideal thing to use would be plexiglass or a piece of glass. I, however, do not have any of that on hand right now, well, at least in the sizes that I would need. So I'm just going to use a piece of wood covered in packing tape. So I'm just going to use this piece of pine. It's the perfect width for what I need, it's the perfect length. I planed it down to make sure that it's perfectly flat, which is one of the most important things when you're building your mold. So I just cut 2 pieces of wood that are a bit longer than my piece of burl. Now what we're going to want to do is cover both of these with packing tape. Once you got tape on your 2 sides, I like to go over it with a little lighter, barbecue lighter, a little blowtorch, just so that way you can kind of melt the tape together and form a perfect seal. Now is also a good time to get your hot glue gun heating up. I'll just stick a bead going all the way around. Now if you look down there, you'll see a little bit of a gap. Now that's because the hot glue is pretty thick. That's okay. We're not going to worry about that yet. So now just repeat what you did on this side, on this side. Alright, so I got my other side on there. Now you're going to want to cut another piece of wood to fit perfectly in there. The snugger it is, the better. And then also cut one to fit on the other side. And then once you've got these pieces cut, glue them in there, just like you did the other sides. And now you can use a whole bunch of hot glue to start sealing up these gaps. And I feel like I keep repeating myself, but don't be afraid to use hot glue. I went through 3 sticks of hot glue sealing up all around the bottom and all the edges and everything. Just make sure that there's no leaks. Because if there's leaks when you pour your epoxy, it is not going to be good. So once you've completed that, you're about ready to pour. What you have to do first is mark how high you want to go. Because once you pour, it's going to be hard to tell. So using a little bit of math, you can figure out exactly how much epoxy you're going to need to mix up to get exactly how much height you want. I'm not going to go into that. You can look that up on Google, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to need about 300 milliliters of epoxy, and if you get these special kind of containers, they have the markings on the side, and it makes it super easy. And you got to mix it for 3 minutes. Keep your hot glue gun plugged in while you do this, in case there's any leaks or anything you need to patch up. And look at that. It goes right up to my line. So it looks like we put the right amount of epoxy in there. And now let me show you how to get the air bubbles out. You're going to want to wait like 60 seconds for all the air bubbles to float to the top. And then you're going to want to use a little butane torch or a little lighter, anything that's got heat, and kind of go over the whole thing. You don't want to hold it in one spot for very long because you'll scorch the epoxy, and trust me, it's bad. Don't hold it in one place too long. And be careful, don't melt your packing tape, because then it's going to get all over the wood and it'll stick. Now, since this is an exothermic reaction, beware, it is going to produce a lot of heat. So once the mold is completely dried, once the epoxy is completely dried, you can begin to start pulling off the sides. And I already pulled off this side, and you can see the packing tape just comes right off and doesn't leave any residue behind. So we're just going to pull off the rest of the sides, and then we'll start to clean it up. Alright, so you kind of want to be gentle with it. You got to give it a good amount of pressure. And there it goes. And this is the hot glue on there. Comes right off. Alright, so I just finished taking it out of all of the little frames and stuff, and it turned out pretty cool. I used my miter saw here to cut it into a cube. So I'll get some shots of this so you can see it a little bit better, and then I'm going to pick this up in the morning since it's actually like 11 o'clock at night. So guys, off camera, I actually made a few more of these little lamps. This is the one that you've seen me making. I made this one, which is pretty cool, and then I made this simple one. So now what we have to do is start polishing all these. And what you're going to do is you're going to start with the grits. You're going to start at 150, 220, and then keep going up the grits until you get to about 1500 or 2000 grit. And when you get to about 1500 grit, you're going to want to start wet sanding these things. Alright, so I got some 150 in my random orbit sander. I'm just going to sand all these, and then we'll start getting to the finer grits. So I've sanded everything to 150 grit. So now I'm going to start going up from 400, 500, 600, and then to 1,000 and 1,200 on these things. And that's when I'm going to start to wet sand this. Start wet sanding that epoxy. And when you do the wet sanding, some of the wood gets wet, and you can start to really see what that grain on that burl is going to start to look like. It's going to be really nice. Alright, so a couple of days ago, I ordered a whole bunch of polishing and buffing supplies from Amazon, and they're going to be here today, so now I just got to wait for them to get here, and then we can start polishing these things up. Alright, so my Amazon order just came here, so let me show you what I've got here. So I've got some little 2-inch LED lights here. I've got a whole bunch of these little flashlights, which are probably going to go in one of the taller ones. Where it is. There it is, right there. And I also bought a buffing wheel, and I bought plastics, Meguiar's polishing compound, which we're going to use to polish that acrylic to a glossy shine. So I've put my drill in my vise very gently. I don't want to break it. Put my buffing wheel in, and I'm just going to stick some polish on my wheel like I saw in the YouTube video, and I'm just going to start buffing my my acrylic. Alright, so I'm making really good progress buffing this. You can see it's pretty clear now. This is only one side, so I buffed this side, and this side you can definitely tell is still pretty murky. So I'm going to go ahead and buff this side, and then we can start working on this. So I just finished polishing up my little cube. You can see all the little air bubbles in there. I'm not exactly using the right epoxy for this, but it looks pretty good. So I just finished doing it, and then I routed a hole in the bottom, which is big enough to set one of these. Doesn't need to be perfect because you won't see it. Alright, so I got my base cut out, I got my little light onto it, and as you can see when I put it on there, it attaches perfectly. So now I'm debating whether I should use little pins in the corners, or whether I should use some magnets to hold the base on. Alright, so I've decided to go with the magnets. I'm going to put one in opposite corners like that. If I need more, I can add more, but I have all these, I've got 8 of these magnets. They're from Harbor Freight, actually, if I can pull it apart with one hand. Nope, but you can see I'm just going to put 2, 1 in each corner, and that should be good. Alright, so magnets are on. I got it all attached to my base. I got my magnets in my base, and inside it looks like complete junk, but on the outside it looks really nice. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. So it's pretty bright outside, but I think you can kind of see that. I'll do an end picture in the dark. Alright guys, so I finished everything. I got this finished. I got bases put on this and this to hide the light. I think the bases look really good on there. They're made out of walnut. So I'm going to go do one final buffing on all of these. Then I'm going to stick batteries in the lights and see how they look. Alright, last buffing is complete. I'm going to use a walnut oil finish on this because, well, it's actually not a walnut oil. It's a walnut oil mixed with a beeswax, so that way it kind of hardens, but it kind of doesn't, which is kind of what I want for this. So I'm going to treat them all with that, and then we'll test them out. Looking pretty good so far. Alright, everything has been buffed in walnut oil, and it's in its final shape right now. It turned out very, very cool. I'm glad that the buffer worked well. So now I'm just going to go put some batteries in all these things, and we'll test them out.